Hello, family. Welcome to Friday's episode of Stand Up. It's episode 319, I believe. Joining me today, the great Dr. Aaron Carroll of Indiana University and comedian, cultural commentator, Christian Finnegan. I'm Pete Dominic. Time to stand up with me right now. Stand up. Hello, and welcome to your Friday. Thank you very much for checking me out here on the podcast. Great to see over 60 of you at last night's subscriber-only stand-up happy hour hangout. We had Professor Eric Siegel stopping by, and we had a great conversation with him about some recent issues, including the Ninth Circuit decision on guns, as well as the Georgia law and more. And you got to join those. You got to hang out with us on Thursday nights, 8 p.m. East, and other times in the future, because I want to be able to do that for anybody who wants to join us. It's always fun. We had a great, almost 2-hour conversation last night. Continued on the Discord platform, the After Hours Party. So sign up now, patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Awesome week of podcasts. We had so many good guests this week, and the news has been great. Thank you for all of your help and your support on it. And if you haven't signed up for a subscription, do it now. I got to give shout-outs to new subscribers. I promise to do that early next week. So if you want a shout-out, sign up right now. That always feels good. Okay, now is the time in the show where I go over yesterday's news. It's the last 24, everybody. All right, let me just start with some important headlines. Yesterday, lawmakers pressed the big tech CEOs. You had your Facebook and your Twitter and your Google on speech responsibility. A lot to read about on that. In Los Angeles, police clashed with homeless activists as an encampment was dismantled. That ship is still wedged across the Suez Canal, and it's wreaking havoc, and we might have to start paying more for things. God, that captain must be having a terrible life. Jobless claims have fallen to pre-pandemic levels. Tornadoes tearing through the South, specifically in Alabama. And the COVID headlines are that USA COVID cases are rising again, reversing months of progress. In this latest spike and wave in Brazil, there is still no peak. Drastic restrictions have been enforced. Miami Beach is again on high alert as another long spring break weekend begins. And COVID-19 is the leading cause of death in Dallas. In New Jersey, the co-owner of a gym who refused to close and was fined a lot during the pandemic is now offering free memberships to those who don't get vaccinated. So if you do get vaccinated, you get a donut. But if you don't get vaccinated, you get to join a gym. That makes a lot of sense. Everything is perfectly fine. Speaking of New Jersey, though, Rutgers, New Jersey State University Rutgers is going to require proof of vaccination just to enroll. That's interesting and should be controversial. And Bill Gates is now saying that the world should be back to normal by the end of 2022 in terms of us all being microchipped by him and George Soros. But the two big important headlines of the last 24 were that because Georgia lost the presidential election, Georgia Republicans lost the presidential election to Joe Biden and then lost the runoff and the United States Senate to two Democrats. Because they lost, they decided to rewrite the rules and make it actually harder to vote. Lots to say about that. Here is old school Southern racist and governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp.
Senate Bill 202. Georgia will take another step toward ensuring our elections are secure, accessible, and fair. The facts are that this new law will expand voting access in the Peach State.
Actually, it'll do the opposite. It definitely won't expand voting access in the Peach State. No, now you'll have to have photo ID to vote by mail. It's going to cut the time to request an absentee ballot. It's going to reduce places you can drop off your ballot access. It's going to make it a crime to give food and water to voters waiting in line. What? It shortens the time frame for runoffs, and it pulls authority from the Secretary of State and gives power to the legislature. And a major controversy on top of the controversy, when Georgia Democrat, a black woman, Park Cannon, was arrested for trying to watch Brian Kemp sign the new voter suppression bill. Ari Berman says, look at how she's treated by police. This is straight out of Jim Crow. And here is President Biden at his first presidential press conference when he was asked about the new voter suppression laws.
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work. Deciding that there will be no absentee ballots under the most rigid circumstances. The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters.
Well, I don't know if he's right about that. I think most Republican voters actually think the election was stolen, which is why this is how these Republicans in states where they can no longer win because there's not enough Republicans have convinced them that they need all these new restrictions. So I'm not sure why President Biden said that. I'm not sure where he's getting that from or why, but I don't agree. There was a lot of criticism for the press corps for not asking questions about COVID or good questions in general. I agree with most of that criticism. They were clamoring for a press conference, and they got a press conference, and they blew it. Here is Mehdi Hasan on MSNBC with criticism for the White House press corps.
I mean, journalists could have asked the president about the issues of vaccine equity. That's still a massive issue in America. Is the vaccine going out in a fair and equitable way to marginalized communities? Big question mark about that to rich and poor. He could have, journalists could have asked the president, what is he doing about that? I would have asked the president, is there going to be a COVID crimes commission? Just listening to you speak there, reminding us of the death toll, the avoidable deaths, the preventable deaths. Is there going to be a 9/11 style commission into COVID? If not, why not? For the highest death toll in America since the Civil War. Are we just going to walk away from the fact for the last year, Trump and his cronies allowed tens of thousands of people to die every week? I would have asked him about that. I'd have asked him, what is the federal government doing to protect the people of Texas, for example, from a governor who does not care about their health and has just rescinded a mask mandate? Is there anything President Biden can do to protect American citizens living in Texas? So there's a fair few things that could have been asked. And, we journalists often talk about how Congress is broken because they can't pass bills that are popular in the country. Maybe we should ask about whether the media is broken if we can't also reflect the concerns of our viewers and our readers and our listeners who say in polls that COVID and the economy are the top two issues. And those were the two issues that didn't come up today.
Man, that guy is real good. That's Mehdi Hasan on MSNBC. Let's head over to CNN, where the son of slain civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. III, harshly criticized the new election law signed in by Governor Foghorn Leghorn Brian Kemp on Thursday, calling out its provisions as a form of racism, specifically singling out restrictions on Sunday voting. Here it is.
Well, first of all, it's a very sad day for this state. It bodes to moving back to Jim Crow era kind of legislation. The impact certainly has the potential to reduce voters, particularly of color, who normally would have, all voters would have a longer time to vote. I think there's something in that legislation that says you can't even bring somebody water. How inhumane can these legislators be? Starting, even though the governor didn't vote, he, of course, approved it by signing the legislation. It's not surprising. It's greatly disappointing that our state has gone in this direction. What it means is that people are going to have to be more vigilant. Black people, young people, older people, poor people are going to have to be even more vigilant. It's unfortunate that this trend is happening all across America and over 40 states across our nation. It used to be a time where if you called someone a racist, they would want to retreat. But now it seems to be in vogue and all right to be a racist. It's a sad day in America, quite frankly.
Can't disagree with that. And here now is the president and director of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Sherilyn Eiffel. She was on All In on MSNBC last night, and she did not come to play. She said this moment was very serious, like January 6th.
One of the most stunning parts of this bill is this takeover of the local election infrastructure and process, and ensuring that the Secretary of State does not really have the power, and making sure that the legislature has the power over these local election practices and these what what had been local election boards. It's unbelievable that this can go forward with barely an outcry, even by members of state election boards, about what this really means. This is significant, Chris, and this is why we need federal legislation. Just like we needed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, we needed federal legislation to deal with the misbehavior of Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and Florida. Now we need H.R. 1 and we need H.R. 4 to deal with the misbehavior of Georgia, and Texas is coming through the pipeline, and Arizona and Iowa and Wisconsin and other states that are planning to now try to ensure that they can pass local laws. That sometimes I think we forget what this really means. These are people who are suggesting that if we lose the elections, we are going to change the rules of the game so that we always win. That is autocracy. It is not democracy. We are at a powerful moment. This is as powerful as January 6th, and we have to respond with power. So we need that federal legislation.
Nobody has covered voter suppression and voting rights better than Ari Berman these last several years. He was on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow last night. Here is author and journalist Ari Berman. Rachel asked Ari Berman if these set of laws had been in place before the November 6th election, much less the runoff election, what would that have meant for the outcome of those elections?
Yes, if this law had been in place, Donald Trump absolutely might have succeeded in overturning the election in Georgia, because his biggest Republican critic in Georgia was the Secretary of State, who they have just removed as the head of the State Board of Election, and they have removed him as a voting member. So if the Republican legislature in Georgia had wanted to overturn the will of the voters, they could have done that through control of the State Board of Elections and through leaning on County Board of Elections. And this is why they have made this such a big part of the bill. There are more sections of this voter suppression bill that entrench the Republican Party and the state legislature's power over election administration than any other part of the bill. So a lot of things got the headlines, right, Rachel? Not being able to give people food and water, trying to cut back on early voting. Those kind of things got the headlines. I think the real purpose here was to intensify control over how every aspect of elections are run in Georgia. So when there are close elections in the future, which they know there will be, they will have unprecedented power to challenge the election results and to decline to certify them if they don't like who the winner is.
There you go. Ari Berman laying it out for you. He's such a great journalist author. I should get him on. He wrote a couple of very important books, several, I think 3 books that I can think of that Ari wrote. Definitely get all his work. Here now is also on Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, Mark Elias. He is the attorney and founder at Democracy Docket. He fought all of those lawsuits and won all of them that Trump was filing to try to overturn the results of the election. He said today democracy was assaulted.
Today democracy was assaulted. You know, we saw democracy assaulted with the big lie. We saw democracy physically assaulted on January 6th. And today we saw democracy assaulted with a pen. The pen of Brian Kemp, as he signed a law to try to accomplish what Donald Trump and the big lie was unable to accomplish. And that's a sad day for us, but it's also a day that we need to renew ourselves and steel ourselves for the fight ahead that'll take place in court.
Okay, let me switch gears now from the suppression of votes, of democracy, the racism of these states, and the laws that they are passing to another important hearing that took place yesterday when we heard from tech CEOs. Just play this one clip I found and thought was good. Here is Mike Doyle from Pennsylvania. He's a Democrat, and he asked the CEOs of Facebook, Google, and then Twitter this question.
If your platform bears some responsibility for disseminating disinformation related to the election and the Stop the Steal movement that led to the attack on the Capitol, just a yes or no answer. Mr. Zuckerberg.
Chairman, I think our responsibility is to build systems that can help.
Mr. Zuckerberg, I just want a yes or no answer. Okay, yes or no? Do you bear some responsibility for what happened?
Congressman, our responsibility is to make sure that we build effective systems to help fight this prejudice.
The gentleman's is not to answer the question. Mr. Pichai, yes or no?
We always feel a deep sense of responsibility, but I think we worked hard. This election effort was one of our most substantive efforts.
Is that a yes or a no?
Congressman, it's a complex question.
Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Dorsey.
Yes, but you also have to take into consideration a broader ecosystem. It's not just about the technology platforms we use.
Geez, somebody get that lunatic Jack Dorsey some caffeine. Good Lord. Speaking of weird, I got to play this for you. This is Tucker Carlson and some other lunatic on his show saying that the right is going to pick fascists pretty soon because Hunter Biden hasn't seen justice.
I think you make a really solid point about the sadness and the powerlessness that people feel in the face of this. And at some point, people are going to say, why should I follow the rules? Why should I be a good citizen if they don't have to follow the rules? I mean, things kind of break down at some point, don't they?
Oh, they will break down. They are breaking down, Tucker. I've said this before, and I'm telling you, I'm worried that I'm right. The right is going to pick a fascist within 10 to 20 years because they're not going to be the only ones on the outs. There's 60, 70 million of us. We're not a tiny minority. And if we're going to be all treated like criminals and all subject to every single law while Antifa, Black Lives Matter guys go free and Hunter Biden goes free, then the right's going to take drastic measures. And it's not about Hunter Biden and his drug use. Nobody cares that guy was bumping booger sugar lines off European hookers on the weekend. It's about justice that he's never held accountable for, and none of the Bidens are. But you would be, Tucker, and so would I.
That's so well put, and you're absolutely right. We're moving toward actual extremism because they're undermining the system that kept extremism at bay. And I don't think we can say that enough. I'm so glad that you just said it.
Jesse Kelly, I mean, that's pretty scary, right? The right is going to pick a fascist within 10 or 20 years. I'm not scared of that. They already picked a fascist. I mean, Donald Trump was a fascist. But that point of view that they're putting out there, I try so hard to watch that stuff. I'm sorry I played that for you. That's terrifying to know that that is a conversation that is being watched by millions of people and soaked in, believed even. Well, I definitely recommend that you catch up on what happened in the press conference yesterday with Joe Biden. There was a lot of important stuff that got said. I think there was a lot of important questions that didn't get asked, but I recommend that. Also, Donald Trump was on Fox News last night, and I'm really doing everything I can not to play his voice on this podcast, but he embarrassed himself, as he always does, by saying lots of stupid shit. But it's worth mentioning that they keep having him on their network as he calls in on the phone. Can't get a video connection? I guess he doesn't want to paint his face orange. Okay, so those are the top headlines and sound bites, according to me, for the last 24. And here is everything else that's left for the news dump. Not politics and not COVID, but definitely important and probably undercovered. And let's get to another great news dump jingle. Lyrics by Dan McDonald, music by Pete Coe, and as requested, this news dump references a previous news dump article about decomposing goat carcasses found in a Connecticut estate. I can't wait to hear it. Here we go.
Decomposing goats piled as high as Donald Trump. Perhaps you'll hear about it on today's news dump.
Fake producer Keith, play just the goat again. Well done, boys. You got me again. Let's start right here in my state of New York, where New York lawmakers have reached an agreement with disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo that would make recreational marijuana legal in the state. Officials said the change should help eliminate a long-time inequity. Black and Hispanic people are arrested on minor marijuana charges much more often than white people are. Also sets up a $4.2 billion industry in New York State, will create thousands of jobs, distract New Yorkers from Andrew Cuomo's actual really important drama of treating people horribly and hiding the death of old folks in nursing homes. But at least we'll have legal weed. The defendant in the Boulder mass shootings appeared in court Thursday for the first time, and he said nothing other than yes, which was his answer when the judge asked him if he understood his rights, according to the Denver Post. And here's some good news. This is a new report from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Agency, who are saying that bald eagle populations are soaring in the lower 48 states, according to the Associated Press. That's how they're writing it. Number of bald eagles has quadrupled since 2009, more than 300,000 birds soaring over the lower 48 states, according to government scientists in a report on Wednesday. In her first public appearance since being sworn in last week, the Interior Secretary Deb Haaland hailed the eagle's recovery and noted that the majestic white-headed bird has always been considered sacred to Native American tribes and the United States generally. In a related report, turkey vultures can go screw themselves. Man, are they ugly. Do we really need turkey vultures? Awful, terrifying heads. A radio host in my old neck of the woods, Western New York, Buffalo, a guy named Rob Lederman, he got fired yesterday for likening toaster settings to the color of black women's skin. Yeah, that is not a great bit, believe it or not. He said, I may get in trouble for this that morning, Wednesday morning before he did it. And he was correct. By the end of the day, he had been fired by the radio station 97 Rock and denounced by the city's mayor, amongst others. Maybe he'll build the shed and do a podcast. I'm sure it'll be great. I made it just sound like I got fired for saying something racist. No, I got fired for standing up against racists. One of the most famous celebrities on Twitter just deleted her Twitter account. Chrissy Teigen said on Twitter last night, for over 10 years, you guys have been my world. I honestly owe so much to this world we have created here. I truly consider so many of you my actual friends. But it's time for me to say goodbye. This no longer serves me as positively as it serves me negatively. And I think that's the right time to call something. Well, good for her. Healthy choice. That's hard to do when you're that big of a deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing allies fell short of winning a parliamentary majority in Israel's latest election, according to a final count released Thursday, now leaving a political deadlock that put the longtime leader's political future in question. The fourth election in just 2 years, bringing a stinging rebuke for Netanyahu. I think I'm going to be talking with Aaron David Miller about this early next week. All right, that is your news dump for Friday, the 26th of March. And now it's time to get to my guest interviews. I've got comedian and cultural commentator Christian Finnegan joining me for Finnegan Fridays coming up next. Always great. And today was no exception. We had a very thoughtful. I love talking to him. He said so many very smart things, and you're not going to want to miss that conversation. But first, I have a whole bunch of questions for everybody's favorite doctor. He's a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. He's a professor of pediatrics and associate dean for research mentoring at Indiana University School of Medicine, also vice president for faculty development there. And he led the mitigation efforts, the COVID mitigation efforts at Indiana University. You could check out his most recent book, The Bad Food Bible. He's also the co-author of 3 additional books on medical myths. He's the editor-in-chief of the blog, The Incidental Economist, and he is also got a great YouTube channel called Healthcare Triage, where he talks about health research and policy. He happens to also be one of my closest friends. Dr. Aaron Carroll is on Twitter at Aaron E. Carroll, and here is our latest conversation. Here I go.
We're doing it live.
I'll write it. We'll do it live. I'll write it.
Do it live. Let's go.
All right. There he is. Dr. Aaron Carroll. It's everybody's favorite doctor, Dr. Aaron Carroll. Hey, you're hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. I like that you were telling me you were having some technical issues, and I'm surprised because you never have technical issues. You're the king of troubleshooting. It must be very frustrating for someone like you.
It is amazingly frustrating. I'm holding it together reasonably well for the next 20 minutes, but inside I'm enraged.
You're a problem solver. You don't like to not be able to solve problem, and if you can't, something breaks inside of your brain.
Yeah, partially that, and partially it's like I don't have full control over my computer because it's a work computer, so I can't figure out what is fixable and what is their fault that I can't fix, and it's driving me insane.
Oh, that's the problem.
Could be like at some point, you get to a point where they're like, just reinstall everything. I can't do that. Right. So I have to keep trying to find solutions around that. And it hurts. It hurts.
Have you started to go back to your office at all? Or are you still mostly always at home?
No, I'm at home. There's just no reason to be in the office. Okay. Everything I do is Zoom, and it's just easier, more convenient. Half my meetings are not even like locally, and most of my meetings are probably like more Bloomington-ish at this point. So there's really no reason for me to sit in an office downtown. Well,
I wanted to ask you about your most recent YouTube videos, and it looks like you must be in studio for that.
I do go to the studio to tape, okay. But I mean, it's just me and Stan. We're masked up right until it's the time to tape, and we do it spaced and safe, and we do it probably about once a month.
Are you fully vaccinated?
I am.
Good. And so I gotta
tell you, Indiana is like flying through. We are opening up to every adult in the state. Anyone above the age of 16 can start getting vaccinated next week.
The thing that's most confusing, seemingly, is that every state is in a different situation. Why is that?
Because they're each in control of what they're doing in their own destiny. There's no like central coordination. So Indiana's been zipping along, and evidently they expect to get so much vaccine starting March 31st that they're able to open it up to everybody. So, starting literally March 31st next week, anyone in Indiana can now sign up to get vaccinated, 16 and above.
What are the kind of bioethics in your mind about people, say me, I'm 45, I don't have any comorbidities, I don't see anybody, I'm not an essential worker, I live in a shed, but I would like to get vaccinated, and I feel like at this point, I should just go. I should just make up anything.
New York has not opened up to 45 plus yet?
50, it's still 50 and over.
Oh my God, we've been at 45 plus for a long time. That's wow. Okay, that's weird. I don't know what New York is doing. I don't know how they're zipping along. I don't know what their demographics are, but we've been moving down the age ranges. But we went to 45 plus a while ago. We've been at 40 plus for a week, and now next week they're going to everybody.
It seems annoying to have to get 2 shots. I prefer to get 1 shot. I like to get the one. I don't care about which one I get. I just don't want to get 2.
Yeah, I mean, if you get Johnson & Johnson, 1 shot and you're done.
You can't really pick, though, can you?
Well, in Indiana, you can.
Oh, is that right?
I guess you can. I mean, in Indiana, you can see which vaccines are being given out at which place, and then you can choose where you want to schedule your appointment. Now, you might have to wait longer. I don't know, but you can get almost anything.
Help me understand what happened this week with the news around the AstraZeneca shot vaccine. There are 3 vaccines that are currently available. AstraZeneca, apparently, there's some question about what they reported, some statistics, and everybody still thinks, the experts are still saying, as far as I've read, it's probably fine, but they clearly, made an error here, and that's bad.
Well, PR-wise, massive, huge mistakes. Just from start to finish, their whole rollout's been somewhat bungled. Their relationship between them and the NIH and the funder has been weird and bad, and they've had stutter starts over and over again. Look, the news out of Europe with stopping the blood clots didn't help either. But locally, I mean, they put out their data, and they said something like 79% of effective. And then the NIH went crazy, or the DSMB, and said, hold your horses, you're not using the correct data, which caused everyone to lose their minds. And then when the revised solution came out, it was 76%. So who cares? This just doesn't matter. But there must be some serious anger between the NIH or the DSMB and the company if they really did this all so publicly as opposed to just fixing the problem privately. But bottom line is, at the end of the day, this is going to eventually likely get approved in the United States, but it's a massive PR disaster.
Where are we?
Somewhat, I don't understand.
Where are we at now that they have solved a lot of the problems of obviously the manufacture of the vaccine, the procurement and transportation of the vaccine, and actually getting people inoculated? A lot of those early issues, because this was a first-time thing for a lot, obviously every state organization in the country itself. But it seems like every day things are getting better because we're figuring out best practices, best solutions, how to move it around, and so on. Is that the case, that we're just doing better and better?
Yeah. Well, I mean, partially it's that, we're getting better at it. Partially is every day we keep adding more and more places where you can get the vaccine. Getting the chains on board recently was a big deal, at least for us locally, as opposed to having to stand up individually run state clinics. On top of that, manufacturing, people are getting better and better. They're figuring out the logistic lines and how to move it out. It's important to understand that, the original vaccines required significant refrigeration and storage that were very difficult. Johnson & Johnson, on the other hand, very easy to move around and give. It's also 1 dose, so you can just go. So I expect it will continue to improve and get better and better. If we add a 4th vaccine, so much the better. But we're doing pretty well as a country. A lot of focus on bad news, but as in terms of getting vaccine out as quickly as possible, we're doing much better than most of Europe. We're doing pretty well.
What about the one that you keep hearing about, the white male Trump supporters or the conservative Republicans in polls are the ones that are not getting the vaccine? I mean, should we care if a certain small select group doesn't want to get it?
Well, again, it's if a certain very small group does, first of all, I always care. But even if, from a public health standpoint, if a small percentage don't get vaccinated, that's fine. If a large percentage of people don't get vaccinated, that is not fine, because we still have community spread. We will not achieve herd immunity. We'll still see this thing ricocheting and rocketing around. That's still bad for them. It's still bad for the healthcare system. And it's important to remember nothing is 100% effective. So whenever we have a measles outbreak, it's mostly among people who are not vaccinated, but it always includes some people who are vaccinated, because nothing is 100% guaranteed. We just need, if everybody or most people are mostly protected, then it's hard for an outbreak to occur. But if an outbreak does occur, then everybody is at risk. And right now, the whole country's in one big outbreak. We can't suppress that until enough people are immune, either through vaccination or infection.
So at no point can you be a social Darwinist and say, listen, if everybody who wants a vaccine got a vaccine, and the people who don't get a vaccine get sick and die, fine, they're just idiots. I can never say that.
That will happen. That will happen. You can say we can't do that, but that's going to happen if people start refusing vaccine. I mean, at the moment, we're still in a good place where demand far outstrips supply, and so we have to just keep rocketing forward. But if we get to a place where huge chunks of the population won't get vaccinated anymore, I think that the public will have very little appetite for continuing to try to be safe to protect those people who will not protect themselves. Now, the problem with that is that there's large populations that are mistrustful of the vaccine for a variety of reasons, or who haven't been able to get a chance to get the shot. So we have to try really hard to get everybody vaccinated as quickly as we can. But I do think at some point, if there are just entrenched populations that refuse to get vaccinated, we will see many, many, many places, if not all, just start to open up and say, what else are we going to do?
I think we've talked before about certain research experiments where they provide the proof of an argument, and people leave the session actually believing what they believe going in even stronger. And I think there's been some data like that on people who are afraid of vaccines. However, in this case, I wonder what, if anything, works to convince people, because I would think that the main thing, at least anecdotally, that I've heard that's convincing people is a lot of people have gotten vaccinated and there aren't stories of people getting sick and dying. And so people have more faith in it. Is there an argument, a policy, or a celebrity that you can put out that people who are hesitant will trust? Or does anything work?
Well, it depends on the population. Usually people that are part of the population or a trusted voice within a population are going to be much more successful at promoting it than without. No question that the best person to convince, if you picked before, like older white male Republicans who are lovers of Trump, look, if President Trump would just get up and unequivocally say, get vaccinated, I invented it, it's perfectly safe, and the liberals are trying to keep you from it, they'd all go, many more of them would probably go get vaccinated. It depends on the voice. There is no celebrity that appeals to everybody. I think finding trusted voices within communities is probably your best bet. That's often somebody local.
I'm trying to think of a celebrity that appeals to everybody right now. I've got.
I don't think you can.
Dolly Parton.
Well, I don't know. Tom Hanks. I'm trying to think of like somebody who
no. Tom Hanks is no, sir. Tom Hanks is central part of the conspiracy of that adrenochrome, the drinking of the baby's blood.
Okay. Who else?
Dolly Parton.
It's hard to find. Yeah, she's pretty much, but she has been promoting it like crazy. So clearly, that's not the answer.
I think she's a good one, though.
She is solid. I agree with you. Who doesn't like Dolly Parton?
Exactly. So in terms of where we're at, you think, generally speaking, we're in a pretty good place with vaccination, and the vaccines have been effective?
So, again, everything is relative, but we're not seeing surges nationally the way that other countries in Europe are. We're people vaccinated quickly. We're managing to hold the line, and every day we hold the line and get more people vaccinated is a step in the right direction. It's getting warmer. Hopefully people start to spend more time outside. We'll have more and more and more immunity. We've got a large percentage of the very at-risk population vaccinated. We're seeing declines in hospitalizations and bad outcomes and deaths, which is fantastic. And we just got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And every day with more people vaccinated, we're better off than we were the day before. So it is somewhat a race, but, I'm much more optimistic right now than I was a couple months ago. And I think that there's, if we keep pushing really hard, we get enough people vaccinated, I think we could do okay for the rest.
I still see people wiping down microphones. I still see people at the cash register wiping down the cash register, and people are still using disinfectants in their homes and schools and businesses. Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, in general, it's never a bad idea because there are other viruses out there besides COVID. Like, we all got sick before. I keep seeing this all the time when I'm talking to, there were people getting sick before COVID, and all of those things you just described are good practices not to transmit any viruses, including influenza or anything else. So I'm not going to yell at people for doing it. I think, constantly washing your hands and being careful is great for preventing transmissible illnesses. It's not the major way COVID gets transmitted, but, I'd rather people try to be careful and take care of each other than not. So I'm not going to, again, ding people. If they're doing that, but refusing to mask up and getting, packing 1,000 people into a tiny bar at night, then yeah, that's silly. You're doing extra stuff, but not doing the basic stuff. If you're doing extra stuff on top of the basic stuff, great, more power to you.
What do you think of how, I don't know if you've heard about how the Israeli government has rolled out the passport? What do you think of the idea of an ID, a passport for Americans? Does that work here?
I don't think that's going to work. First of all, let's understand that Israel didn't just, it's not one thing. People always look at these kinds of other countries and they go, oh, look, they did this one trick. That's why they're so much better than us. Not only did Israel vaccinate like mad, they were in lockdown, and I mean lockdown, until like the end of February. Ben Gurion, like their only airport was shut down, not like we're checking flights, not working until like the end of February. They had the whole country like you can't leave your house or you could get a ticket. Like they were in we call it lockdown, but we were basically asking people to shelter in place. They were in lockdown, plus vaccinating like mad. So clearly Israel's willing to tolerate and do things that we are not. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that Israel is also willing to, look at passport vaccinations. They're much stricter about all kinds of things than we are here. My concern, and I'm not sure it's not a concern there too, with that kind of thing there is that we develop tiers and we start making it where, you can do stuff and you cannot. And some of it is based on privilege because you've managed to find yourself a vaccine. Those people have not, even though everyone would like to be vaccinated. Now, someday when there's just vaccine everywhere, that anyone can be vaccinated in an instant if they choose, and they're choosing not to, I wouldn't be surprised if at least some private businesses start to require vaccination just to get, a level of safety or to be able to do stuff they otherwise couldn't. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Disney World someday was like, vaccinated or you can't come in. Or airlines someday might even do that. Or, you want to go to a Colts game, prove you've been vaccinated first. So you might see it with some private industry before you do with government, because but even then, I'm sure there'll be lawsuits and everything else, and we're going to fight it. We just don't like that kind of stuff. But all of this can be avoided if enough people just go get vaccinated. Schools are required. Schools require vaccines right now. I have no doubt that someday COVID will be added to the list of vaccines that are required for to attend school. We do that all the time already at a state level. So why this won't be different would be surprising to me.
Can we talk about gun violence?
Sure.
You've done a lot of research on gun violence over the years. Talk to us a little bit about what kind of videos, articles, and
we've done a whole series on firearms and public health and everything else. And your
YouTube channel on healthcare.
Yeah, our YouTube channel, and I've written a number of. I've written a number of columns on it. So, I mean, the gist of it is, the things that I try to push is like, let's look at research and data and evidence. And, some of them show that some policies do work and some policies don't work. So we should stick to the policies that do. I also, we talk about harm reduction, that especially when we talk about, I'm a pediatrician, we talk about kids, almost all kid violence is like, finding gun in the home. So if we could just stress, like, look, you want to own a gun, you own a gun, but could you store it safely? Could you not store it unlocked and readily available?
Well, I won't be able to get to it quick enough if an intruder comes in, if I've stored it, behind a combination safe.
And well, get one of those thumbprint locks. I mean, like, again, these are the kinds of things that are overcomable problems if you really want to. If people really want to reduce injury in their own house, there are things you can do to store guns safe. I live in Indiana. I know lots of people who own guns. We don't spend our time demonizing about that. We talk about how to store it safely and not have it be around small children. There's lots of things you can do. There have been studies to talk about that. So, and of course, I get upset because I think we spend so much time talking about
mass shootings, and like the vast majority of injuries are just like simple handgun, one-on-one, or just small family. And it's often like
in your house, people you know. It's just rarely the big news splashy thing, but that's where we seem to spend all of our energy. And I'd much rather us focus on the many issues. I mean, even from a suicide perspective, if we could do a better job of keeping guns away from people who are contemplating suicide, we could probably eliminate a huge percentage of suicide. And I know people will be like, oh, they'll find other ways to kill. There's just so many suicides are split-second decisions and then stop. And if you can just manage to stop the person between the split-second decision and until they change their mind, that is a significant number of suicides. It is not that people are like, I'm going to kill myself Tuesday and I will do it no matter how. Like, those are rare. Those are rare. Most often it is like a split decision. And if you have a gun, you can do it much more quickly than if you're forced to come up with some other complicated plan. And so there's a lot we could do without getting to, mass bans or anything else that would do huge amounts of good, especially if we always seem to talk about as assault rifles too, which are bad. Don't get me wrong, but the vast majority of gun violence and gun deaths are handguns.
While the vast majority are handguns, you can kill more people quicker with a rifle that holds more.
Can you?
Or
a
gun that holds many bullets, I think, would be the...
Yeah, I mean, many, but like there are handguns out there that hold,
you can make a special clip.
15, where there's there are semi-automatic handguns that shoot 15. Like, I think maybe I'm getting don't attack me if it's 13, but you can still kill plenty of people with handguns, and handguns kill a lot of people, way more people.
So you think it's less about the type of gun and more about how people get it, who gets it?
Well, this is where I think the politics gets down. It's like I think people are saying, well, at least I feel like I could demonize that or I can get ahead of that. And don't get me wrong, I'd like to see that be less too. I really, really, really would. I just think our discussions about what we could or could not do or how to make this safer are just so entrenched in politics and partisan arguments that it's very hard to make the incremental progress that we'd like to see.
Well, when I was on Joe Rogan's show, we talked about guns for
listen to you with the name dropping.
I was on Joe Rogan's show. I was also on Real Time with Bill Maher. Now I work out of a shed.
Well, isn't Joe Rogan's show basically out of a shed?
Yeah, it's always my funny joke. It's like a big star back here in my backyard. So it was just crazy because one of the biggest. And I'm still getting like haters from that. And one of the things that they're most outraged at is that I classify gun violence as a public health issue. And I think it's crazy that is controversial, that anybody jumped on that. Why is it a public health issue?
Because it is. I mean, it's just
what else are public
mortality?
Huh? I'm sorry, I thought that would be
it is. It's a massive cause of morbidity and mortality in the United States. It's homicide and suicide are like massive causes of adolescent death. They're like, it's number one or number two. I mean, I can't remember exactly, but it's huge. It's huge. How do you deny that?
I mean, but the other public health issues would be, anything that causes death, a lot of death, right? Like.
Yeah, I'd say if it's a top cause of death, number one cause of death in small children outside of like the neonatal period is like often car accidents. That's why safety in cars is a public health issue. Number one one of the top causes once you get into adolescence is like suicide and homicide. It's like, then that's a public health issue. Like, that's what we need to deal with because we're trying to reduce at a population level death, and that's what causes it.
How important was the COVID rescue bill to public health to fight COVID or anything else health related?
It's super important. I mean, just look, resources. Like, I mean, I don't want to, get into politicizing or anything else, but like, yes, it's like the massive resource, like the things that we've talked about so many times that would have made it safer and better for all of us to engage in whatever activities we were never resourced. And this is it's doing some to resource some of those things so that we can do a better job at maintaining it now and fighting it in the future. And the second is that, people are hurting. People are hurting and they need financial security. So that we keep asking them to do things like not work, not go face to face, not, be in dangerous situations, but we're not helping people to do that. This will definitely help people to get by.
So I think my final question was just going to be about the way forward and what you see. If you see anything, you've always been good at following politics, and I wonder if you see, given the agenda of this Biden administration and the Senate filibuster, if you see anything that you think can be done to improve health insurance, health care in America. We talk about this.
It all just did. I mean, it's like it goes under the radar, but part of this bill that just got passed, they made significant changes to the Affordable Care Act. I mean, they got rid of some of the subsidy cliffs and they improved other aspects. And they probably did more to improve the Affordable Care Act in the last month that have been done in the last 4 years. Easy. Not to mention, all the things that have been rolled back during the Trump administration are going to stop. We're not going to see Medicaid work requirements. We're probably going to see states expand the Medicaid expansion. We're going to see, I think, a lot more pushes. So I'm not pessimistic about that. I think they just got changes. Now, the filibuster is a problem for getting more changes to occur. But I think it's possible that they may work out some compromises to get some bills through in such a way that maybe we can have some traction or move forward. But, that I don't know for sure. Clearly, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of appetite to destroy the filibuster. But on the other hand, I don't think Democrats are going to be happy about getting elected and then being able to do nothing.
Right.
So I don't know. I've never been good at predicting how far the Democrats are willing to go in order to achieve their policy goals. I think they did a solid job of getting that bill passed and moving that forward. That was fast. This is not the Obama administration where we spent God knows how long trying to get Republican votes for, Obamacare, in a vain attempt. Clearly they were like, we're willing to work with you. And when it became clear that there were going to be no Republican votes, they just moved. And they were unapologetic about it. And it was hard to fight it given how popular it was in America. So it didn't go so well for, I think, the Republicans in that instance. If they can keep up that kind of momentum, maybe they can get more done. But there are only so many things you can do through reconciliation in a year. So it's going to be an interesting next few months.
You wrote the Bad Food Bible, which is to this day a very important book for folks to reference if they haven't bought it yet. And I have just a one nutrition question, which is, I texted to you yesterday, but let's make it public. How do you feel about mixing stimulants and depressants? I want to be able to stay up late, but I also want to have a buzz going or fall asleep easy. Diet Coke and whiskey. What does that do to your body?
This is where I was like, I didn't actually say this, but I was like, well, if you're worried, just drink caffeine-free Diet Coke and whiskey if you're looking just to go to sleep.
No, I want the hit. I want the caffeine. I want some fuel. So am I just wasting time and money with the Diet Coke? Does caffeine in soda give you, if you drink coffee regularly, do you even feel it?
Well, there's some. It's not a huge amount. I'd also argue that probably unless you're making the world's biggest Jack and Diet Coke, it's probably not that much Diet Coke. So the sheer volume of caffeine you're getting is going to be pretty low.
I feel like there's a subtle judgment about mixing Coke with whiskey because you are a purist.
There's no question there is.
You won't.
Bothers me. It bothers me.
Yeah,
sir.
Talk to me. I want to understand what you won't put anything. You make mixed drinks.
I do, but I make it would be like an old fashioned or something where it's like maybe like 3/4 of an ounce of like Demerara simple syrup and like maybe 3/4 of an ounce of citrus. It's not like Coke.
Do you think I'm behaving like I'm 17?
I don't believe in my heart you're measuring anything.
No,
that bothers me.
I like to use it in my heart, like I'm hiding it.
Cocktail should be a precise measured thing, and I just envision you like,
That's exactly.
That's just getting alcohol into you.
That's bad. Okay, I'll step it up. We should do a whole thing. You should just be a bartender virtually and teach people how to make drinks because you are such an expert.
Well, I would say and I follow people who are real experts.
Yeah, I know.
But I care.
I know you do, and I want to care. Not like you, but I want to care a little bit more.
Yeah,
I want to be a little bit more sophisticated.
I take pride in the fact that whenever Amy gets a drink, almost anywhere she goes, she's like, I don't like this as much. And that's because I know what they're not doing it as carefully or as well. So it's like she can drink an old fashioned most places, but she's still very particular about her old fashions. And I know what to do.
I have a billion more questions for you, but I know we're both out of time. Thank you so much, as always, Dr. Aaron Carroll, for joining me. We love you. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure.
There he goes. Never gets old to thank guests. So go on Twitter if you're on Twitter and thank him at Aaron E. Carroll. 2 R's, 2 L's. Always excellent. Always great. Love talking with him. Very good friend of mine. Go buy his book, The Bad Food Bible. You can thank me later. It's based on the best research and data on so many different things. The Bad Food Bible, how and why to eat sinfully. So good. And watch his YouTube videos at Healthcare Triage. That's his YouTube channel. All right. Now on to my Friday regular. Ladies and gentlemen, he is one of my all-time favorite stand-up comedians. He's got a new special, actually, that's going to drop very soon. And he's got several others that you can get right now on iTunes. You can follow him on Twitter at Christ Finnegan, ChristianFinnegan.com. Always a great conversation with Christian. Today was no exception. We covered a lot, and I'm really happy about this. I hope you like it. Here it is. Okay, here we go. Finnegan Fridays. Christian Finnegan wrapping up the week, or not. You never know what is going to happen when we're talking, but people like when we talk. Mostly they like the
And you never know what's going to happen to the week. I mean, who's to say that there won't be something happens later tonight that then the week won't have been fully wrapped up?
That's a terribly excellent point. Yeah. I mean, a lot can happen between now and then. Like New York State could legalize pot. Did you hear about that?
I did not. I mean, I knew it was in the offing, but did something happen today or recently?
There was a big development today that they're going to fast track it. And my question is, what took us so long? A, and B, because you follow New York politics, your wife's a business owner, the whole Andrew Cuomo thing. B is he survived it. I think he survived the whole scandal. I think he's Ralph Northam.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the difference, we've discussed this, I think we discussed it last week or whatever. There are differences between the Northam situation and Cuomo situation, you know, but even in the sense that
Cuomo's way worse.
That Northam is going to be term limited out anyway, you know, that they only, which is so bizarre that you can only serve one term as governor in Virginia. Like they're constantly having to turn over the government there. But yeah, I think that Cuomo kind of knew that if he just sort of battened down the hatches and, you know, I don't think he'll win again. I hope he doesn't run again. And, you know, and if another scandal were to burst, who knows if we'd go through this cycle all over again. But I kind of felt the same way about the Cuomo harassment allegations as I felt about the Brett Kavanaugh situation, in the sense that obviously this stuff needs to be pursued. You know, if people are coming out and accusing a powerful person, usually a man, of abusing his power and sexual harassment things, these things need to be pursued. But it immediately puts everyone into that culture war mindset, and everyone just retreats to their battle stations to a degree. And it becomes a fight about something different. It stops being about Andrew Cuomo. It starts becoming about ground gained or lost in the culture war between men and women in general. You know what I mean? Whereas like the nursing home scandal in and of itself, I mean, if you're talking about gravity of mistakes, you're talking about actual lives that are lost, you know?
Really good point. Yeah.
And so once the sexual harassment allegations came out, it kind of became entirely about that. And I think a lot of people who are inclined to not believe women or to not take allegations seriously could retreat back to that, like, oh, fucking cancel culture, Al Franken, blah, blah, you know, the same talking points we've heard 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, I saw so many variations of the tweet, like, you know, well, look what happened to Al Franken. Like, we don't want that to happen again. You know, to which my reply is, well, let's talk about what happened. Al Franken, who barely squeaked into office twice, I believe, was replaced with Tina Smith, who won her special election by much larger than Al Franken had ever won any of his elections. And also the 2018 Democrats didn't have to go through an election cycle being asked at every stop, well, what about Al Franken? What about Al Franken?
That's
like,
a great
they
point.
removed that.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, you can make the moral
that
argument.
made me feel so much better about that whole Al Franken thing. I didn't realize that she had won by such a big margin. Yeah, Al Franken, people should remember, Al Franken was in a recount with Norm Coleman for months. They didn't see the senator from Minnesota in his first election. Well, that's really, and Tina Smith is a great senator. So why are we even talking about Al Franken?
Because she doesn't provide the viral video fodder that Franken did, I guess. I think that's what it is.
She's lower profile senator, yeah.
And you can make the moral argument that, you know what happened to Franken was improper and these were things that happened in a comedy context. And you go ahead and make that argument. But if your argument is purely political, like, look what, we don't want to go down this road again. Well, it's a pretty shaky argument.
I've been thinking a lot about how similar Andrew Cuomo is in his personality to Donald Trump. There's a lot of overlaps there in terms of the bullying and the kind of
sort of New York big swinging dick.
Yeah, that weird masculinity, especially like Cuomo's like that fucking fake Italian bullshit. And, Trump's isn't ethnic because he's just an asshole. But regardless, there's some overlaps there. And what I was thinking was, well, a lot of Trump supporters would say, I don't like him. I don't like his attitude. I don't like his tweets. I don't like a lot of the things he says, but I like what he's getting done. I think the same goes for Andrew Cuomo. I think that even though he killed a lot of people in nursing homes and did all kinds of really inappropriate, stupid, idiotic shit in 2021, much less years prior, to women, I think people are like, you know what? Things are good in New York. I don't care. You can go murder somebody as long as you're getting things done. And then finally with Ralph Northam, Ralph Northam yesterday signed the ending of capital punishment. Virginia put more people to death than almost any other state, and they ended capital punishment. I think in some ways, and a lot of black people are in death row. I think that was more white people that were upset about black people. I think a lot of black people are like, you know what? We don't want whatever else might replace Ralph Northam. He just ended the capital punishment, and that's good for us.
Well, it didn't help when, his lieutenant governor had issues of his own with regards to women. I think that kind of took some of the steam out of the an
important point. Yeah.
Northam should resign movement.
Because they were going to end up with a Republican potentially.
Yeah, exactly. If they are both to resign, and so I think that did mute that response.
The point is, who am I? What is the problem with if the person in power is a sexually harassing, assaulting, murderous asshole? As long as you give me my tax cut or legalizing marijuana or handling the rest of the pandemic or whatever it is that I like or advocating for my interests, I don't care what he does to other people in his personal life or other things.
Well, I would say a couple things to that. First of all, if you read Rebecca Traister's great New York Magazine article last week talking about Cuomo, she kind of puts that perception under the microscope, this idea that he got so much done. That was way more a matter of branding than of reality. That, Cuomo was very good at exhibiting sort of a strong hand of leadership. Like he was very good.
So low.
I'm sorry?
The bar was so low.
The bar was so low. I mean, there have been so many, problems with Elliot Spitzer, and, they're definitely, people are like, all right, great, somebody's in charge. And I think a lot of people do kind of want a benevolent dictator when it comes right down to it. It's like they kind of want to feel like somebody's in charge. And that's been Cuomo's brand his entire career. Like, I'm the dude who can come in and handle this, But I think the reality.
More, please. I like it a lot. I don't care. I want one more.
I can't. I don't know if I can do it anymore. It's like,
I'm the dude that come in.
But I don't think that ended up being true. I mean, a lot of what Cuomo has done in New York, which has been very successful, is what we used to call triangulation, which is what the Clintons were doing, which is that I'm not left or right. I'm the sensible dude in the middle who can kind of play both sides, and beat up on liberals, like affect kind of mainstream Democratic policies, but kick the left.
And that's as a result.
The left
and that's the job.
Them.
That's the requirement or the opportunity, whatever you want to call it, of a New York State governor. For people who don't know, our state is mostly pretty rural land-wise, but most of the people live in New York City. But that kind of moderate Democrat is who often gets elected or gets in power to appease all of those different interests, I guess. Sorry to interrupt you there. You had other
you're
points.
100% right. I mean, and I think that a lot of, people in other parts of the state, that's the only thing that makes them tolerate Cuomo. Is like, all right, well, at least he's mean to those New York City liberals. At least he humiliates de Blasio at every possible given opportunity. At least I can get behind that. But, in terms of getting stuff done, I mean, the stuff he, quote unquote, got done up until recently, up until Democrats took back the Senate, the New York State Senate, has been kind of showy stuff. I mean, gay marriage is great, but it's not like he was on the forefront of that. I mean, he was riding the wave of gay marriage sweeping across the country.
I just heard a long, deep dive into his whole past, where when he was his dad's consigliere, Mario Cuomo, running for president, he apparently is accused of making homophobic advertisements, like anti-Ed Koch, who was closetly gayed. Closetly gayed? I'm not going to edit it out.
Gayness was foisted upon him. You've been gayed.
I'm not editing it out. I said it. It's what came out of my mouth. Anyway, he said something like, vote for Cuomo, not the homo. That was apparently Andrew Cuomo was behind that.
I didn't know that he was behind that. I knew that was a controversy,
allegedly.
And that Mario Cuomo had denied that he had anything to do with that.
Well,
but
all right, enough about him. But I do get a lot of questions from listeners, and I do want to confront you with them. But basically,
I know not everybody here gives a shit about New York State politics.
No, it's not that. It's a lot of people are wondering what the letter U did to you. You pronounce the last name Como, but it is Cuomo, and people are wondering. And people have emailed me and asking, did the letter U hurt you?
Boy, that's a good question. I you know what? It's one of those things where I think it was my dad really loved Mario Cuomo. Was a big fan. was a big fan of the guy. And I am still kind of a fan. And maybe if I was older when Mario was the governor, maybe I would see him the same way as I see his son. But I still have this sort of rarefied opinion of Mario Cuomo just because he was such a great orator and wrote such wonderful speeches. And so my dad would talk about him a lot growing up. And I think my dad, just being from Boston and just whatever, being from Massachusetts, just said Como, Como, Como. And so I just sort of adopted that.
Oh, that's interesting. There really is something to that. Huh?
Yeah, I think so, because you're right. It is Cuomo. I know that is proper, like Cuomo. Although I will say the liquid U, which is what we're talking about here phonetically, I always have a problem. I always get mad at my wife when she says coupon. That drives me batshit.
I say coupon.
Coupon. I say coupon like a normal person. It's the worst.
I have issues with pronunciations. I think certain people are monsters for certain pronunciations. Obviously, I think that the H. What is the H followed by W? Where or
whom? Yeah,
those people. How do you feel about those people?
I can sometimes be one of those people. But I did take. When I went to college, I was an acting student at NYU, a little boutique university, and I had to take speech classes for the first. I was only there for 3 semesters, but in the acting program. But you would take these speech classes, and you'd learn to speak standard American English, and you'd have to say. You have to practice things like honorary constable and fleeing sheep and all these stupid things, Yeah. And I had to learn how to say Florida instead of Florida, things like that. And so I do think that I did probably go through a pretentious period of my life where I was saying Quen.
Your voice and movement teacher hated the word Cuomo. Apparently, never brought that one up for you.
Clearly, it was not an issue. There's something that Chris Hayes does that drives me batshit.
Yeah, go ahead. I love his show a lot. I think he is probably the smartest person on TV. I don't love him because he hasn't always been the friendliest to me, but that's legitimately 100% me. He has. It's definitely nothing him, but right. I want him to like me more.
Of course. Oh, I have that feeling.
And so
there's so many people who I really think they're wonderful and they don't feel the same way about me.
Right.
And I have to remind myself that it's like, that doesn't mean that I should stop liking what they do. They don't, not everybody has to like you.
Rachel Maddow didn't come on my show for her book, and I am outraged by it. Just outraged. I'm also outraged that the women's United States national soccer team doesn't know who I am. But moving on.
Chris Hayes says this thing that bothered me, where he'll say like it's the if you're saying the whole enchilada, it'll be I'll listen to it on my headphones a lot on the Sirius app, and I'll hear the whole enchilada, like almost like a Yiddish thing. But it's just, I think it's just the way his lavalier mic hits it. But it's just, anytime he has to do an H like that, because he kind of ramps up to words sometimes for dramatic effect, the whole issue is.
Well, I get way more petty. His face really bothers me. And here's what I'll say.
Have faces that bother you.
Here's what I'll say about it. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of face. There's a lot of hair. And it always comes back to just obvious jealousies of my own. But it I'm not going to. But I love that show. I use a lot of. I watch it a lot. Okay, so want to ask you about.
So I'm sorry about my use of the liquid U. I will try to pronounce Cuomo more properly in the future.
I think you should apologize for using the phrase liquid U as well. I mean, I don't even think I've heard that before. I mean, now you've used it like 4 times. Now I feel a lot of us.
Trust me, I had to learn this in college, and I have not had to use that information since. So now I'm thrilled that I can throw out the term liquid U.
We all had to learn it, apparently, but I guess we didn't want to learn it from you in this moment this way. But I'll take it, and I'll be a better man as a result. A smarter person, as I always am when I talk to you. Let's talk about guns, because I don't remember when we've talked about.
You mean these bad boys?
No, not your arms.
No, I don't have guns.
But you and I don't think it's interesting, because we've been talking regularly kind of since and over the last year. And what's been interesting about the last year is that we haven't seen these high profile. There's been more gun violence, I think, in 2020. During the pandemic, but these high profile mass shootings, because nobody goes anywhere, nobody goes out.
Right.
So we don't tend to talk about it as much when it's suicides, which is most of the gun violence. When it's homicides, we talk about it more when it's these high profile, horrific nightmare shootings. But so the point is, you and I haven't really gotten your take on this. And I think we've been talking about it all week, and we've been talking about it for years, but I just don't recall your thoughts on it. And you're always original in the way that you think about things. And so how do you, my question to you is, how do you react? What are the kind of go-to arguments or reactions that you have when you find out that a horrible mass shooting has occurred?
Well, I mean, part of me, I will admit, part of me just kind of rolls my eyes a little bit, because I already feel like I can predict, the exact architecture of the following days of debate, and the wave, the recurring wave of outraged, followed by counter outrage, followed by just, sinking again into the surf. I don't mean to be totally cynical about it, but I think you'd have to be insane to not be cynical.
Well, the one thing I do say,
gun control.
I'm asking you the question, but I always say, let's be careful. And I got irked at Colbert then, and I know a lot of people say nothing ever happens. And it's not true. At the state level, a ton of laws have been passed, and it's because of activists and people in Mom's Demand. At the state, things happen at the state level all the time. It's because of gerrymandered districts and the way the Senate works that even though there's 80% approval on certain ideas, gun control ideas, it's not the case in deep red districts or something. So I'm not that cynical that nothing ever happens, because at the state level, things do get done. What do you think of that?
No, you're right. I mean, you can't be cynical. You hear people like John Lewis talking about voting rights, or, cynicism is death. You have to, it is an act of patriotism to resist cynicism.
I like that. Wow.
Well, thank you.
Wow. Why? Why is cynicism bad?
Well, because the powers that you're struggling against want you to be cynical. They want us to be cynical. They want to make you feel like nothing will ever change. So stop bothering us and let us go back to selling our guns, please, or whatever, and it is an act of courage, I think, to remain hopeful in the face of all evidence pointing that there is no hope. I'm not the person I'm not that person. I wish I was. I wish I was the kind of person who just instinctively had that sort of happy warrior attitude of just like dust myself off, get back into the fight. I wish I was that person. I'm not, but I acknowledge how necessary those people are. The people who, whether it's A Million Moms or, these various groups who are just in the fight every day, or Moms Demand Action, or, I don't know the various groups that I get emails from 5 times a week. And it's like, I get annoyed by the emails, but God bless them.
Guns down, every town, Brady United, Moms Demand.
Exactly. It gets right down to it, though. What you're fighting against, we have completely ceded ground on this conversation for as long as my entire adult life, certainly since I was a teenager, that everything becomes fighting on their battle of you're trying to take away our guns, and Democrats being like, no, we're not, as opposed to maybe we should. You know what I mean? Like trying to almost give the most gun-friendly posture we can possibly present while still trying to affect change. And that allows people who are, gun supporters or Second Amendment supporters to fight on their own turf. And also it makes liberals look like liars, because I think a lot of us know, and there's not hegemony among the Democrats and the left in terms of, there's definitely a spectrum of, some people just want to, like, if we could just ban assault rifles, that would be enough. In my opinion, that's not enough.
No, because the pistols, you can have a pistol that carries 15 bullets. It's not people have to understand just a little bit about guns and how they're manufactured and what they can do.
Well, and also we've allowed a large swath of this country to exalt what is essentially a fetish. We've allowed these people to lie to us and lie to themselves that it's about protection against the government. When really, in my opinion, it's a fetish. It's no different than collecting Funko Pops, those stupid little dolls that you can, those like collectible dolls you can get of like Game of Thrones characters or Spider-Man and things like. It's no different than than somebody who's like loves classic cars. It's a culture that people get into, but they've managed to wrap it in this moralistic, patriotic argument, and which I'm sorry, I don't buy. And people are like, oh, I need a gun to protect my family. It's like, oh, really? You also probably have a security system on your car, right? But you probably don't subscribe to Car Security System magazine every month. You probably don't get a boner flipping through Car Security magazine.
It's different.
You don't pose next to your car security system and make a political, I'm
going to make my car security system my backdrop on Zoom.
But that's to me what tells me is good. This is not about the things you say it's about. It's a cultural fetish. No more. I'm not even going to say no less. No more. That's all it is. And this idea that, that the amendments are carved in stone and can't be even discussed, much less changed. It's like, even though the word itself has the word amend in it, you would think that people would understand that these things are not, sent down on tablets from Moses.
It's wild debating the gun folks.
Well, because they have their talking points so memorized. And I give them credit for this. And it's an easier position to defend, in the sense that, unless you're saying, take everybody's fucking gun away, we should live in a nobody should have a gun, period. You're going to have to find some degree of vague. You have to find somewhere on the continuum that you're comfortable with. Whereas if you're like a serious hardcore, Dan Bongino type dude, then your position is very easy. No, fuck you. I should have as many guns as I want, period. Go away.
With the COVID relief bill being close to $2 billion, I just tweeted yesterday, I was like, they should have put $1 billion in there for the gun buyback. I'd be fascinated, especially right now when people are cash strapped. What would happen if you said $300 for every whatever, 500, whatever it is, turn your guns in? the thing, every time we talk about gun violence, I think I first try to think about the statistics. So I focus on suicide first, which is the most preventable of gun violence, I think. And I think, man, what would happen if we bought, like, if we just got, like, I don't know, if there's 400 million guns, we got like 10 million guns through a gun buyback. That'd be good. That'd be a good expenditure money. Now, if you could melt them down and turn them into wind turbine blades, that'd be even better. But nonetheless, I think that a gun buyback would be interesting. Other than that, there's other policies that we can talk about. But it sounds like what you're saying is it's very, very challenging to even have a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you offered a comic book buyback, maybe some casual people who own some comic books might sell them back to make a little extra cash. But if you're a comic book collector, if being into comic books is part of your, self-image in your, if you consider that a lifestyle, I'm a comic book person, you're probably not selling your
But that's why we have to have another government incentive.
They're worth money,
We have to have a government incentive to get wives to annoy their husbands. You're going to sell some of those comic books and guns back. We need the money. This is ridiculous. You have way too much. You've spent way too much. I mean, if there were a government program to help spouses encourage their loved ones to sell back their crazy fetish hobby.
Yeah. It's like there's more guns than people in America.
That's so crazy.
And I don't remember, I'm talking completely out my ass here, but I know the statistic for the percentage of people that actually own guns is not as large as you think it would be. It's just the people who have guns tend to have 7 of them. And that's the line I would like to draw. It's like, okay, you want to have a gun? Great. You can have a gun. You can have a gun.
It would be reasonable.
Everyone can have a pistol or a shotgun, and that's it. But the idea that you should be able to have 14 guns in your house, there's no constitutional defense for that. And again, it's hard to not slip into the same argument, same talking points. To like, it's in the Constitution, right to bear arms. It's like, yeah, that also says well regulated. Well regulated to me says there are rules. It says well regulated.
I read is it Stephen Waldman, the history of the Second Amendment? Our friend Eric Siegel always talks about this as well. But I mean, if you pay any attention to the history of the Second Amendment, it was not controversial up until like the late 70s or early 80s. At some point, I forget the whole story. But when they figured out how much money they could make off guns and ammo, and
what a motivating kind of like a fundraising angle.
Politically as well. All right, last thing I wanted to ask you about, I should have asked you before. I'm wondering how closely you're paying attention to what's happening at the southern border. That was a lot of questions for President Biden today. There's been a lot of attention on that. It's interesting to watch journalists react to this and how they're reacting to it versus what happened in the Trump administration. There's a lot to say about it, and it's frankly a situation that's been happening for over a generation. It's this migration away from, Central America, especially through Mexico, for several different reasons. It's so complicated. There's so much nuance required. People try to boil it down to, good and bad and a binary all the time. What are your thoughts on what's happening right now?
I don't claim to be, an expert in this, but I definitely get the sense, and I'm not trying to defend, how do I phrase this? It seems kind of convenient that this is all of a sudden a crisis. I don't believe it, quite frankly. Jacob Soboroff, who, is an MSNBC correspondent who goes down to the border all the time, basically said as much yesterday. I think he wrote an article or there was something on Twitter saying it's like the idea that this is a new crisis, that all of a sudden something different is happening is, kind of made up. And it's heightened because, of course, the Republicans want an angle, to take away from the rescue plan, and that vaccinations are going ahead of schedule. They need something to sort of harp on, and I think that the mainstream press wants to have an angle to the Dems in disarray trope. They want to have this idea that, like, oh, whenever Democrats are in charge, like, oh, there's all this problems and it's like a powder keg that's about to blow.
Yeah.
I just don't see it like that. It is a problem. Of course, it's a problem. It's going to continue to be a problem. And I don't know what the long-term answer is. As far as even on the left, you see a lot of people going off on the kids in cages thing, which, is a hard nut to crack. I don't see enough people, I think, making the distinction there is a very big difference in an unaccompanied minor coming over the border and being held in a facility until a family on the American side can be properly vetted, so you're not sending these kids into trafficking or violent situations. There's a big difference between that and stripping children from their families, of families that cross the border together. And I see a lot of people, even on the left, kind of conflating those two. It's like, oh, he's no better than Trump. It's like, no, it's clearly not the case. And even the facilities that have been built recently to sort of house some of these unaccompanied minors, they seem to be taking it much more seriously with dignity and humanity at the forefront of their plans.
Yes.
Now, maybe I'm obviously biased, but I don't know. I kind of feel like this whole thing is a bit of it feels like a political tactic, blowing this up as if it's some new crisis.
Well, it's mostly kids coming here from Central America. And I mean, here's Jacob Soboroff. He says people seeking asylum won't stop because the U.S. president says stern things like, don't come. Obama tried. Didn't work. Trump separated families. Didn't work. It won't work for Biden. Deterrence and punishment do not work. That's his opinion. And, the other important point I think about Central America is that that the Trump administration stopped sending aid to those countries to help solve the problems that the people were trying to escape. I mean, this problem, the gun problem, whatever we're talking about, you have to get to the root of why people do things.
Yes, you have to. And, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear it's like, my family's struggling. Why are my tax dollars going to pay for some kid in Honduras? I get that. I understand it.
They're going to a fighter jet. Like a dime of your dollar is going to the kid in Honduras.
Of course. People don't want to think about it that way, though. Yeah. That the amount of money that you're talking about to try to help make these countries livable enough that people won't flee is a drop in the bucket.
Yes.
When it comes right down to it.
Really is.
It's an investment. It's an investment in our own country to do that. And obviously, climate change, they say, is exacerbating situations.
Yep.
So I'm not going to pretend like I know what the answer is, but I think this whole rush to act like this is some like Fukushima event that happened at the border. And now all of a sudden there's this crisis. It's like, no, this has been a crisis. It's continuing to be a crisis. If it's only slightly more acute now, I would say it's because the weather's getting warmer and because COVID is starting to get under control. That's what the only things to me that, in my opinion, that seem to make sense that it's happening more now than it was a year ago or 2 years ago.
But if we call it a crisis, let's be clear, it's a humanitarian crisis that these people are desperate. Let's look at it that way and not as that they are threatening us.
The crisis isn't that we're in danger from them.
That's not what
the crisis is that those people have to feel like they have to do this.
That's the way I see it. Unless I haven't heard about all of the crimes that they're committing. I've heard them literally running across the border, turning themselves in and trying to get asylum. That's they're not coming here, and they're mostly young people. It's demagogued, and like you said it perfectly about the politics behind it, for sure. Yeah. It's a humanitarian crisis. We should, as proud Americans, want to help these people. That's what we should want.
And in a completely self-interested way, it helps us as well. It makes the more we can help people in their own home countries, the fewer people that will be sending their children across the border. And so, not only is it a humanitarian effort, it is also, if you really care about the things you say you care about, then you should want to help these people in their home countries.
I care about this final question just enough to ask you on the record. There's a thing on Twitter about Sammy Hagar versus David Lee Roth in terms of who was a better front man. How do such things even start? Was that jumping off some kind of an event? Did someone die? Was there?
Yesterday was the anniversary of 5150 being released, which was the first Van Halen album without Sammy Hagar. And so I think some music website had sort of did one of those who's better, and I think it took off from there.
There's no question as to who's better, right?
There is no question. Okay. There is no question. There is no question. I mean, you're talking about a serviceable, functional lead singer who sang for a band that had a number of pop hits and probably made more money versus a guy who's on the Mount Rushmore of like rock and roll frontmen who basically created the whole genre. Now you might hate like hair metal, you might hate like hard rock and the sort of, hairspray spandex thing, but you're talking about the guy who basically created the template between him and Robert Plant. I mean, Robert Plant in terms of looks,
Led Zeppelin,
David Lee Roth in terms of showmanship and presentation, and really invented an entirely new genre of rock and roll lead singer. I mean, it's impossible to overstate how important David Lee Roth is in the culture of hard rock. I'm not saying musically, it wasn't the greatest singer. Lyrics were actually super fantastic, but just the way he changed what a rock band could look like and do on stage. Like, no longer was just kind of like Ozzy Osbourne's Black Sabbath, just sort of hair in your eyes, just sort of head in the microphone. It's like the idea of the guy doing high kicks on stage and having that sort of Carnival Barker, circus MC quality. That's all David Lee Roth. It's 100% David Lee Roth. So, you might hate that, but in terms of, cultural, historical rock and roll importance, you can't compare the two.
Listen to this guy.
Sorry.
No,
I'm glad I have strong feelings about this.
I'm glad I asked. I knew you would. All right, buddy. I really appreciate it as always. Thank you so much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate the way that you use words together to help my brain understand things.
Well, thank you, Peter.
And thank all of you for joining me all week. What a week it has been of guests. I highly recommend you go back and listen to whatever you missed. And thank you very much for your support. If you haven't signed up for a paid subscription, then what are you waiting for? Let's do this. Come on. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Sign up, become part of our community, and be happier, more enlightened, more informed for it. That is all I have for you this week. I cannot thank you enough for supporting me on this podcast. Thinking about maybe taking some time off next week because it is spring break for my girls. So we'll see what happens. You know me. I say I'm going to do it, and then I end up in the shed working. But I am threatening again to take some time off. Lots to do around the house, the garden, build a new shed, and so much more. I got to have a garden shed now, in addition to the studio that I'm in. I got to put the tools that used to go in here somewhere else, and that's my big goal. What's yours? Let me know. That's all I've got time for today. Thank you very, very much. John Carroll, take us out, would you?
Only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.
Today's show ender is an idea for, well, the show. Mark Anderson reached out to me and said, how How about Stand Up Evergreen? You're doing very topical episodes, and that's great, but there have been some interviews, like the Peter Coyote interview from about a year and a half ago, that avoided the present and was left evergreen. There are times when we listeners just want to have an intelligent conversation without all of the current news. All you have to do is take the interviews that aren't about the day's events and put them up in a partner podcast with a little introduction about you and the stand-up show that it came from. Let your listeners decide what goes into the evergreen show. That way, you're not responsible and you won't receive the ire of your guests. It'd be great for authors, artists, musicians, philosophers, etc. And it would highlight your best work for the ages. Stand-Up's greatest hits. What do you think, folks? Let me know what you think of Mark's idea and any other ideas you have. StandUpWithPete@gmail.com. It's our show. Bye-bye.